Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. Today I want to take a look at a wish list, and I know a lot of people make these videos of things that they want to see in these games, and I find a lot of those videos are unrealistic because they say, well, we want to add North Wilkesboro, we want to add Riverside to the next game, and let's have this and that, and a lot of it's just not doable, especially at this stage of the game. Uh, you know, yes, we're in the fourth installment now, so we're starting to get a concrete, foundation of 704 games is starting to get in a good rhythm, and we're seeing consistencies with their games of the good features staying and trying out new stuff. But I want to take a realistic look at what should be added to the next game and it actually be legitimately possible to be in the game, not adding old fantasy tracks that we all know are not going to be added. That's just, everybody's just wasting their breath or typing when they request stuff like that. And you're going to hear me reference the Codemasters F1 series quite a bit, and as well as NASCAR Thunder 2004 specifically. And that's just because those games are just timeless classics. And I don't know if it's necessarily just for the nostalgic reason, because for me, 2004 is probably one of my favorite seasons in the Cup Series. But it's not just a good game because of that. A lot of effort was put into the game when that came out. And the same with the Codemasters F1 games today. A lot of effort's put into those. But specifically Thunder, because it's NASCAR related, so it's easier to, make comparisons between the two. They had fantasy tracks. Red Ball was a pretty popular one, and they had fantasy drivers, specifically like higher numbers, like the 174 car and fake sponsors and stuff. And it was a neat addition at the time. So I think that definitely helped those games stand out. Personally, I wasn't a fan of the fantasy drivers like that, but I'm more talking about like the Earnhardts and the Petties and adding things like that. And although I did skip the last two games from 704, when I saw what this game offered, I was pretty intrigued, and I felt like they made a really big step forward with this game. And after playing it, I think they have too, and as the updates come out, and we'll talk about that, the game does get better and better. So, just to reflect on this particular game, I think some of the main highlights and main selling points of this game for this year, and great additions, we had Jeff Gordon, which is a big one, and we'll talk about that. Having highlights after the race, that was a neat addition. We have our spotter packs and our monthly DLC, and that wasn't new. That was something that's been going on since the first integration of the game. But it's nice that they've stuck to it. We now have a paint booth, which is a really big one for a lot of people, and this is sort of a foundation going forward for possible expansion on that. Personally, I'm a fan of the menus. I think the menus are nice and easy to navigate, and they're clean looking, and that's a big thing for me. And the career mode is a really standout thing this year, and it's nice to see a lot of effort put on that, and not just online racing. And I do want to mention, I'm not going to talk about online racing at all. I'm not personally one that likes to race online a whole lot. I do league racing in GT Sport, but aside from that, I don't race online a whole lot. The reason is because of this clip. But it's not just because of that. This video is more of I say it's a realistic wish list, and it is, but a lot of this is just my personal opinion. This isn't, it's not. I'm not speaking for everybody here. I think I'm speaking for a lot of people here, but this is a personal list, and that's why I'm not going to mention online. So if that pisses you off, well, sorry. That's just I can't help you. Now, as far as the title of this next game, I don't believe there should be a title change. because of the familiarity and the consistency that we have now. I really hate how we have like this problem, and Call of Duty is guilty of this, where we've got Modern Warfare 1, that's easy to follow, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, but now this year we have Modern Warfare. And it's like, why? Like, are you that lazy that you guys can't come up with another name other than Modern? Like how? Why do you gotta confuse people? Like, in 20 years, who the hell's gonna know the difference? I hate that stuff, and movies are guilty of that too. The F1 series did it right. Since 2010, it's just gone up by one number each year, and that's the name of the damn game, and there's no problem with that. And EA did the same thing with their NASCAR series. Yes, they had Thunder in there, but at least there was still a year afterwards, and you knew what game was which. Eutechnyx is guilty of this. They made NASCAR the game 2011, Inside Line. Then they went to NASCAR 14 and 15. So at least in the end, they kind of caught on to some consistency, but it was too late, so they're guilty too. As far as a cover star, not that this is a huge deal, but I think personally Penske makes the most sense just because they haven't been featured yet. Logano was on NASCAR 15.
Short track racing.
But as far as 704 making the games, we've seen two Gibbs drivers, and we've seen Hendrick and now Stewart Haas. So I think either RCR, but more than likely Penske, I believe, is probably going to be on the cover. Could be wrong. Whatever, not a huge deal. This is just unnecessary speculation. Again, I didn't buy Heat 2 or 3 because of lack of improvement. And that's just a personal opinion again. I did not ever play Heat 2 at all. Heat 3 I did play a little bit, and it did handle quite similar to this game as far as feel goes, but it's still, feature-wise, it wasn't enough for me to come back and be willing to put down the money to buy that game new. But this game really sold me. I found the sound was updated, the graphics looked really nice. It was a really big improvement, and this, I feel like, is a really solid foundation for them to build on. And Heat 5 is going to have a lot to live up to, because this is quite a popular game, and rightfully so. The monthly DLC is continuing, and I think it's going to have to continue. They really have no choice to continue the DLC to this point, and I think they will. It's a good way for them to make money and keep the game fresh. And I know you can say it's a gimmicky thing to do that, but you're getting new challenges. If you buy the season pass, you're getting all the skins, you're getting challenges. I think it's worth it. Maybe they'll have to add a little something extra next year. I don't know. We'll see what they come up with, but for now, I think what they're doing is working. But, updated menus are great, and skins are great, but, what's missing? You're always going to find something that you wish was there, and it isn't there, and that's just the way it is. You're never going to be satisfied with what you got. You'll always have people that are saying, well, we want this, or we want this, or we want this, or whatever. It's just the way it is. But I think, to put it in perspective, there was a point in time, and that was 10 years ago, or a little more, that with NASCAR 09, and if you remember, those cars didn't even have manufacturer logos on them. For whatever reason, I guess maybe down to a licensing thing, or, whatever the case. I've heard that there's manufacturers that have problems with damaged models because they don't want their cars portrayed like that, which is kind of dumb, but, I guess I get that. But we don't have that problem anymore, and that's great. We've overcome that. We don't have to, look at generic cars anymore. We have all the manufacturers present, and we have multiple series to run. And Heat Evolution, we didn't have that. We had the Cup Series, so that's another great thing that we've got now. But there's a lot of old features that are missing, and older titles. We have all the manufacturers present, and we have multiple series to run. And Heat Evolution, we didn't have that. We had the Cup Series, so that's another great thing that we've got now. But there's a lot of old features that are missing, and older titles, and I'm talking like back to 2002 and 3 and 4. And this game just doesn't have those features, and we're getting to the point where that's really not a, not a good excuse anymore to not have those. So they're gonna have to start including some of this stuff, and it's not, it's not huge things to ask for in a title. And I get that there's more important things that need to be addressed first, but I think a lot of those have been rectified, such as better engine sound, better damage model. I personally am happy with the damage model. But aside from all that, I think this is what I think we absolutely need to have for the next title. The first one is caution replays. Those need to be added, no question, next year. There is absolutely nothing worse than not knowing what ended the race under caution or sent the race to overtime. That's absolutely something that we're going to have. And on the same note as that, we should, it's about time we have a replay function as well. Not just, the end of the race highlights is a nice thing to have, but we should be able to watch our race start to finish, different at camera angles, whatnot, all viewpoints from all 40 cars. I think that's just something that's big that's missing. When I made, and I've done it twice now, when I've made the NASCAR Crank It Up videos, those are extremely difficult to make with the format that we have now. It's painfully long to make a video like that, and it doesn't have to be. The F1 games are a great example of a replay function. Even Dirt, anything Codemasters makes is great. Assetto Corsa is another game that's got a great replay function. Project Cars, those are all modern titles that are essentially competing with 704 games, and they're all, a lot of these games you're going to notice have similar features that this game doesn't have, and that's a problem. It's also interesting to note that with F1 Championship Edition, and this is just a personal preference that I think would be awesome, there was I believe it was called Spectator Mode, and if you're not aware of that game, which you might not be if you're not an F1 fan, you could go and pick any track, race length, weather, and then you could organize the grid any starting way, like the starting grid, any order you wanted, and you could just watch a race. And it was a TV-style broadcast it had commentary from the actual commentators. Apologize, I don't remember their names at the time. And yeah, you could have an automatic camera, you could control it yourself. There was a lot of camera angles to choose from, and it was great in the off season. If you're like me and you can't get enough racing, it was a great thing. You could watch a race, wherever you want. It could be 25% distance, could be 100%, could be whatever. That'd be a neat thing to have, but again, small steps. We need a replay function first and foremost before anything like that's going to happen. Another huge addition, I think, and this isn't necessarily gameplay, well, it's not gameplay oriented at all, forums. We absolutely, at this point in time, need to have forums. We're 4 titles deep here, and that's a feature not a feature, that is something that probably should have been made last year, really, for NASCAR Heat 3. Eutechnics had forums. I really enjoyed my time on those forums back then. It was sad when that all got shut down. It was an awesome place. You could communicate with the devs. We could speculate DLC, bug reports, just discussions with each other, paint schemes, sharing our own paint schemes, whatever. I spent a lot of time on those forums, and I know a lot of people made a lot of friends on those forums, and it's a really neat thing to have. Twitter works, but it's really not as engaging as a dedicated website would be, and I think that's something that 704 would really benefit from, especially if they're going to keep going with this esports stuff. Be a great hub to have for news and stuff like that. Another complaint, why the hell can't we change left side tires on a pit stop? That's insane. This is a NASCAR game. It happens in the real world all the time. There's no reason to not be able to change left side tires. And And also, it'd be nice to see pit stops while you're under caution if you want to. You know, when you're riding around caution and you hit your pit settings and you just flash forward to the green flag, sort of kind of takes you out of the moment. If they're going to go ahead and motion capture pit stops, we should at least be able to watch them, unless, you know, not just under green flag pit stops. And while we're on the subject of cautions, they're going to have to do, and maybe they can do this in a patch, but a little better AI control when the caution comes out. If they're wrecking in front of you and the caution comes out, you're totally out of control of the race car, and the AI does a miserable job at avoiding that, and a lot of the time you'll take damage, and then you're screwed and you got to pit. And that's really not fair because you have no control over that. So that's something that would absolutely have to be looked at. Yeah, and I mean, it could be done in this game even, but definitely something that should be fixed. On to the paint booth. I know this is a big one now that we have a paint booth. We have a starting point, which is great. It's not bad. It's not amazing by any means, but I mean, we can't complain. We have something. It's not as good as Inside Line was. But I think we could take some stuff from Inside Line, like a color wheel, and GT Sport, as you can see, has the same thing. It doesn't even have to have special colors, just a basic color wheel. A little easier to navigate. And better looking numbers. And I don't know if they're going to work on that in NASCAR Heat 4 or not. But even if we could skew or stretch like the template numbers, that would be, you know, that would be a start just to make this look a little more like something from the real world. Because these numbers look sort of out of place. They're kind of tiny and narrow and not right. And, you know, even to expand on that, real world numbers would be awesome to be able to use. Like, just like you could pick Brandt or whatever sponsor you want. You know, what if we could pick Justin Allgaier's 7 car or 7 number? And I know you could say, well, the team's not going to, like, if you take Joey Logano's 22 and you try and put Mobile 1, well, they would be pissed. They'd be pissed. Well, if an easy fix for that would just be have it locked so you can only pick the sponsors from that car. So if you pick the 22, you can only have Pennzoil and Shell and Auto Trader and whatever. And that way you could create fantasy liveries for current drivers, and that would be kind of a neat thing to do. There's a lot of people on Instagram that make stuff like that. It's sort of neat to see fantasy paint schemes for modern cars. And also, there should be more than one slot available for a custom car. It's kind of crazy that Thunder 2004 had 4 slots, and if you go another year up to 05, there was 4 series, and each one of them had 4 slots per series. So one slot for custom car in 2019 is sort of shitty, and that should definitely be looked at. Another mode missing, and it was present in Eutechnics, is testing mode. I get there's no NASCAR testing in the real world now, but, you know, that's kind of shitty that we can't test. And especially for wheel users, when I first fire any new racing game up, the first thing I go do is I go in a practice room and I sit there and I fool with my wheel settings till I find something comfortable. I don't want to do that in a practice session. I don't want to have to go to a race weekend and go through all my settings and load into the race and have other cars around me. Why can't we just be alone on a racetrack somewhere? That'd be super easy to program that. I think that's kind of a necessity, and that's something a lot of people want, especially where setups are super important in this game. I think that's something that absolutely needs to be added. And the in-car camera needs some adjustments. GT Sport has kind of a bare bones customization with it where you can adjust like your forward and backward and your up and down. F1 has camera movement settings. Project Cars does, but it's sort of hard to know what you're doing because you got to do it from the menu. And Assetto Corsa has the best one yet, in my opinion, because you can really fine tune where your camera is. So it's sort of a standard thing in racing games now, and I think it needs to be applied here, and not just to like cockpit. I think all views. Roof camera is my favorite view, and I love that camera. I want it as real world as possible, just like this. I know I've seen people get this view in replay mode. I don't know how they're doing it. I haven't even seen it in my game yet. But if it exists in the game already, why can't we just use it as a normal view? that could be patched in quite easily. And while we're on the subject, I get that this isn't like a full sim racer, but I'd love if we had the option to run the cockpit view with no wheel and no hands. NASCAR '09 had that. It was available, I think, in 2011. I find in its current states really distracting if you're using a racing wheel, and his hands just don't match up with yours at all. If we could just get rid of that, I'd be a lot more comfortable running cockpit view. Again, just a personal thing, but it's a feature that was around 10 years ago, so it's something I think we should have now. So moving forward, Codemasters introduced retro cars in 2013, but they polished it up a little better in 2016. And I think NASCAR could kind of do the same thing. You could have cars from the 70s and up, and I know this is a really requested thing. My favorite cars were from like the early 2000s. I think that motor sound is just so awesome.
He said, I can get in front, but I can't stay there. There's Harvick. Elliott Sadler is still in this despite crash damage early. He's up to fourth. Got in the wrong line.
I get that that's a lot more work because you're getting into having to record new engine sounds and stuff. So that's sort of why I put this last on the list. But with that said, they could take a page from the 2K franchise, not 2K20. Don't copy anything from that game. But like 2K17, 18, you have a showcase style. WWE is really good with that, or 2K is really good with that. They take moments in history. If you're not aware, if you're not a wrestling fan, they take moments in history from years past and you recreate matches like they happened. I think that'd be a really neat thing to do here, sort of expand on their challenge mode. We have Earnhardt's pass in the grass at Charlotte, or take Senior from, where was he, 16th to 1st at Talladega. Just, old races that everybody remembers, and try and make a challenge out of it if you have older cars. Like I say, I know that's going to be way down the road if that ever goes in. I know if we were to do something like that, we obviously couldn't have every car from that season. If it was, like, say, 1988, they're obviously not going to make every car. And I know it's quite a process to get a paint scheme approved anyway. You have to get it signed with every single sponsor on that car. So I understand that's a lot. And in the F1 games, they've left out a lot of sponsors on that car, probably for that reason. That and some of their tobacco sponsors. Those cars in F1, I find you can get away with it a little more just because it's more about the car, and in NASCAR, sponsors just mean a lot more than they do in F1. You think of the Miller Lite car, but with Ferrari, you just think of Ferrari. You don't necessarily always associate it with Marlboro. Many people do, and same with McLaren. And then I guess if they were to strip some of the sponsors off NASCAR, that would sort of ruin it for some, which is true. But, we're seeing new diecasts come out, historical diecasts, and they're making them with most of the logos that were on the car back then. Jeff Gordon paint schemes, one for example. But it's a cool idea to think of. But that's going to lead into more of the smaller ideas, and these aren't as important, but I think it'd still be fun to include. If we can't have retro cars, we could still have retro liveries, and that's what I was alluding to in the beginning of the video. I was really surprised that we had Jeff Gordon in this game, and his car is pretty much the same as it was at Homestead, just on a Camaro body. And that's really interesting because that sort of opens the door for what we had in like Thunder 2004, where we had Dale Sr., we had Richard Petty, we had Cale Yarborough on modern cars at the time. And I think that'd be a neat thing to do again. I think they could easily make some money on DLC with that, have a retro pack or 2 retro packs or whatever from different eras in the sport. And I think that would really sell well if they were to do something like that. That would mean a lot to the fans, and there's a lot of people that are requesting something like that. And it would probably bring a lot of the older generation fans who might not otherwise buy the game. It might encourage them to get it. So that's definitely something to think of. Switching gears, I think a lot more attention could be paid to the driver models. Kevin Harvick looks okay. Jimmy Johnson looks okay. But most of these models look terrible. And, you know, I get that. That's not a huge complaint for me. I'd rather them fix and work on physics and stuff like that than character models, but it's still something to point out, I guess. I think a damage models, like I said before, is always going to be a request from people. I think it's okay with what we have now. The only thing I could say to expand on would be have debris, sort of like EA Sports had back in the day, where you could run over debris and cut tires and stuff. That was a really neat thing, and we could actually have legit debris cautions then. You know, maybe that would open the door for more potential bugs, I guess. Just the way these games have been going with their bugs. But anyway, that's just another thought. And lastly, finally, one of my favorite features in any NASCAR game ever, and it was in Thunder 2004, go figure, was the MRN grid intro that they used to have. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I know having Barney Hall and Joe Moore do it was probably a lot of the reason, because they're really iconic people and they're really good at what they do. Well, Barney Hall is unfortunately gone now, but he was arguably the greatest broadcaster of all time. But it was a neat thing to have. I thought it was unique. It was ahead of its time. It wasn't that repetitive for a PS2 game, really, and it was just like listening to MRN. It was very well done.
Hermie Sadler would like to break this run of bad luck he's been having at the speedways.
Well, his crew chief assured me this morning that they've got a fast car. Let's keep an eye on him and see how it goes.
The Target Dodge is having some trouble in the points this year.
And how frustrating that must be. You're working just as hard as everyone else, yet you just can't seem to finish well on race days to gain the valuable points you need. These guys need a good finish just to regain their confidence as a team.
Qualifying had a track announcer as well, same with when a caution came in, that was sort of neat. And I know, obviously, Barney Hall's no longer with us, but, you know, we've got Dave Moody, Mike Bagley, Jeff Striegel, Kyle Rickey. There's a lot. The list just goes on and on and on about with all the really good MRN employees that are still doing that now. I think that would be a cool thing to bring back. It adds a little more realism, and, you know, okay, if they can't get the rights to MRN and get MRN to do it, I'm sure NBC seems to get involved with stuff like this. It would be, you know, they're in the NHL games. It'd be cool to have them in, and it's a way to include Dale Jr. That's a great way to get more fans if you can advertise that Jr. is a bigger part of the game. Although there's a lot of hate for Rick Allen, so I don't know how that would go over. So that's where I'm going to cut this off. I kind of went a little longer than I wanted to, but I wanted to try and get to everything that I had written down and try and touch on a little bit of everything and point out some of the stuff that we used to have in games that we don't have now. So I'm sure there's stuff I missed, and if there is, put it in the comments, maybe what you want to see in the next game. And as I'm filming this, the Q&A hasn't happened yet. They're doing a Q&A. Today's the 3rd of December. So yeah, that's a few hours away yet, and maybe they'll touch on some of this that I mentioned in the video. I really don't know, but it'd be interesting to see anyway. If you're not aware of that, it's probably already happened by the time this goes up, but it's on Facebook and Twitter, so that'll be interesting to tune into that and see what's actually said, if anything really informative. I also wanted to give a shout out to Real Radman. I'm going to put a link to his channel in the description. Thanks for him for letting me use the clip of the MRN. I also want to excuse some of the NASCAR 09 and the F1 Championship Edition footage. I do not have a capture card where those are PS3 games, so I did the best I could with my phone. So apologize for some shitty looking footage, but I did the best with what I had. So anyway, thanks to him for that, and like I said, there'll be a link to his channel in the description. It's a neat channel. If you don't already watch it, you probably do. If you found this channel, I'm sure you know of his, but regardless, thank you to him, and yeah, I'll catch you in the next video. Leave a like if you liked it, and subscribe for some more NASCAR content. So we'll see you later. Thanks for watching.